The countdown to the NHL draft is on. Opinions on who the LA Kings should take are many. We discuss that and more on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love you to leave us a positive comment and review on Apple Podcasts if you're a fan of the show. And we are on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network, also host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the last 17 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's a $200 in a bonus bet with a winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. We are 12 days away from the NHL draft. The first round is June the 28th in Las Vegas, and the LA Kings hold the 21st overall selection. Due to trades, the Kings have not had a first-round pick in the last two drafts. Their last first-round pick was defenseman Brandt Clarke back in 2021. The Kings' last three first-round picks were all top 10 picks. Clarke, 8th overall. The year before that, Quentin Byfield, 2nd overall. And the year before that, Alex Turcotte was the 5th overall selection. Clarke is expected to be a full-time NHL defenseman next year for the Kings, expected to be. Byfield emerged last season as a potential star in the making. And Turcotte, due to injury issues, is just now starting to emerge as a potential NHL talent. Should get a full-time role this coming season in the Kings' bottom six. In 2017, the Kings were just out of the top 10 at number 11. They selected forward Gabe Vilardi, since traded him away to the Winnipeg Jets in the PL Dubois deal, and he's emerging as a top six forward in the NHL. So the Kings' recent draft history has been a little bit of a mixed bag, but that's pretty much what the NHL draft is, and frankly, all drafts in all sports. Every team has their hits, every team has their misses. I'd say without analyzing every team's top picks over the last 10 years, I'd say the Kings are maybe slightly above average in the NHL as far as getting solid NHL caliber players with their first round picks. So let's start with where the Kings are picking this year. Barring any trades, LA has the 21st overall selection out of 32 first round picks. I have said it before, but I believe it is a fair time frame to judge if a first round pick or any draft pick, frankly, is going to be an NHL contributor. About 5 years from the time they're drafted, it's pretty, I think, reliable to tell if they're going to turn into something or not. But like the draft itself, that's also not an exact science, just a kind of a generalization that I think is pretty fair. For some players, obviously, they can get the NHL faster than 5 years. Maybe some players, it takes a little bit longer for that. But I think, again, around 5 years, I think is a fair amount of time to judge whether a draft pick will turn into an NHL player or not. But I think, generally speaking, you can tell in 5 years. So let's look back at the players taken in the NHL draft at the number 21 spot from recent past NHL drafts. So we'll go back 10 years. 2014, St. Louis Blues take forward Robbie Fabry. After drafting him, it took him 4 years to finally become a full-time NHL player. He was a part of the St. Louis Blues Stanley Cup winning team in 2019. He's currently a third-line winger with the Detroit Red Wings. By the way, David Pastrnak was taken 4 picks later at number 25, and he has turned into an elite forward for the Boston Bruins. 9 years ago, with the 21st pick in the 2015 NHL draft, the Ottawa Senators selected forward Colin White. He took 5 years to become an NHL regular. This past season, he played a total of 28 games for both the Penguins and the Canadiens, so he has not really turned into a full-time NHL player, kind of like Robbie Fabry has. By the way, Brock Besser of the Vancouver Canucks was taken 2 picks later after Colin White at number 23, and he's been one of the best goal scorers for the Canucks. 8 years ago, in 2016, It was the Carolina Hurricanes with the number 21 pick, and they took winger Julien Gauthier. Now, he's never turned into a full-time NHL contributor. Last season, he played 27 games for the New York Islanders. Buffalo's talented forward Tage Thompson was taken 5 picks later at number 26. 6 years ago in 2017, the New York Rangers took forward Philip Hedl. 2 seasons later, he was playing in the NHL. This past season, he only played 10 games because of concussion issues. But the season before that, he played 74 games and had 22 goals. So when healthy, he's a pretty solid NHL contributor. 5 picks after Philip Hedl, at number 26, the Dallas Stars selected their number 1 standout goaltender, Jake Ottinger. And finally, 5 years ago, back in 2018, the San Jose Sharks took defenseman Ryan Merkley. Things did not work out for Merkley in the NHL or with San Jose. He's now playing in the KHL in Russia. 1 pick after Merkley at number 22, the New York Rangers took defenseman K'Andre Miller, who has turned out to be a pretty solid addition to their defensive core. So there is an example of players taken specifically at number 21 where the Kings are picking, and also later than 21, but in the 20s where you have had impact players, star players selected. And with that 21st pick, a little bit of a mixed bag. Some players have been pretty good, others have not. But again, if you're picking in the 20s, it's not exactly where you'd like to pick to get an impact player, but you can find them in the 20s. Let's look a little bit more specifically at the LA Kings themselves. Mark Yannetti has been the Kings director of amateur scouting for the last 17 seasons. Over that span, the Kings have only had a pick in the 20s twice. In 2014, the Kings hit a home run with the 29th selection. In 2014, they took forward Adrian Kempe. Obviously, he has turned into a star, led the team in scoring this past season. It did take Kempe a little bit more than those 5 years to turn into something, but he certainly has been a great pick. Without going too deep in the history of the LA Kings, but certainly recent history for the LA Kings, he has been their best pick in the 20 to 30 range. The only other time under Mark Yannetti, the Kings had a first-round pick in the 20s was in 2018. They had the 20th overall selection, and they selected forward Rasmus Kupari. Kupari has still struggled to turn into an everyday NHL player. Of course, he was a part of the trade that got Pierre-Luc Dubois to LA, shipped him off to Winnipeg, and he didn't play much with the Jets this past season. So again, he's been a miss, you would have to say, at this point for the LA Kings, picking him 20 back in 2018. So what are the so-called experts saying about who the player is, what position he plays, that the LA Kings should take with that number 21 overall pick? We'll talk about that next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Life is unpredictable, but a good life insurance plan gives your family financial safety to protect them against some of the unknowns. Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It makes choosing the right policy for your family easy and quick. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $290 a year for $1 million in coverage. Some options are 100% online and let you avoid unnecessary medical exams. Policygenius helps you easily compare your options from America's top insurers with just a few clicks. Policygenius has no incentive to recommend one insurer over another, so you can trust their guidance. They have thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot from customers who found the best fit for their needs. Get peace of mind by finding the right life insurance with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quote and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com. All right, so we're going to get more into who a lot of the experts are that say what the selection should be for the Kings at number 21 in this year's NHL draft. And I'm not going to pretend I am an NHL draft prospect expert. I am not. I rely on others who are in scouting and player evaluations to give me the information. And then when I get all that information, maybe then I can have an informed opinion. But I went and I looked up 10 different resources that I feel are pretty reliable as far as their reputation in the business, and look to see what are those 10 sources saying about who the LA Kings should pick with the 21st selection. Well, I looked up 10 different sources and they gave me 10 different names. 8 of them were at the forward position. So let's start there. We will begin with the NHL.com, the NHL.com mock draft. They had 2 of their scouts, player evaluation people, make selections. They were Adam Kimmelman and Mike Morale, who I actually worked with many years ago at Fox Sports Radio. I don't know if he'd remember me, but I'm going to try and reach out to him to see if maybe he'll come on the show and talk about the NHL draft in a soon coming up episode. But as far as Adam Kimmelman, he thinks that the Kings should select with the number 21 pick Canadian right winger Tarek Parasak from Prince George in the Western Hockey League. Kimmelman said about Parasak, quote, his hockey sense is the best attribute and a big reason he was able to lead the WHL rookies with 105 points, 43 goals, 62 assists in 68 games, despite not having overwhelming size at 6'1", 195 or speed. He's fearless in traffic and was able to produce from the slot. All the elements of his game that are good now will only get better as the 18-year-old continues to develop physically, end quote. So as far as Tarek Parasak, he was ranked as high as 13 by Craig Button. Craig Button in his mock draft had him taken 13th. He was selected as low as 85th by the Hockey News, one of their experts. So that's a pretty huge disparity. So you see just right off the bat how inexact of a science this is. You've got 2 different experts. One has this player, Tarek Parasak, at 13. The other has him at 85. As far as our guy that we're talking about here, Adam Kimmelman, he had him at number 21 going to the LA Kings. Again, that was forward Tarek Parasak. The other NHL.com draft expert, Mike Morale, believes that the Kings should take center Jet Luchenko. He says about Luchenko, quote, the 5'10", 165-pound, 17-year-old right-handed shot is smart and tenacious on pucks, had 33 power play points, 30 assists in 68 games. He could play center or wing and finished among the top 5 in 6 of 10 on-ice categories at the CHL NHL Top Prospects game in January, end quote. So Jet Luchenko was ranked as low as number 12 by Sportsnet. They thought he should be the 12th overall pick. He was ranked as high as 41st by the Daily Faceoff. So again, pretty wide disparity in that player, Jet Luchenko. Tony Ferrari, one of 2 Hockey News draft experts we're going to talk about, thinks the Kings should take Nikita Artemenov, who is a right winger. He's playing professionally in the KHL in Russia. Ferrari said about the 5'11", 187-pound left winger, quote, the young Russian plays the game at a breakneck pace, constantly looking to push defenders back and create havoc. Artemenov always has a plan for what he's going to do next, trying to find a way to make a pass to a teammate in a prime scoring area. There are times when Artemenov's thought process is a bit aggressive for what his skill set is capable of. He wants to be a difference maker offensively, and although not every play pans out, you can see his processing. If he can refine things just a bit, he might be a high-impact playmaker. Even if that side of his game doesn't take the step it should, he is a high-motor player who is pestering to opponents and hunts down pucks. Every NHL team needs a player like that, end quote. Nikita Artemenov kind of sounds like a Blake Lizotte type, doesn't he? He was ranked as low as number 21 by the Hockey News, and that's Tony Ferrari, had him ranked the lowest. He was ranked as high as number 34 by TSN's Bob McKenzie. Speaking of the Hockey News, we keep it with them. Their second expert was Ryan Kennedy. He thinks the Kings should take another Russian forward. That would be Matvei Gridin. He played last season for Muskegon in the OHL. He's 6'1", 185 pounds. He's going to the University of Michigan, apparently. Elite Prospects said about Gridin, quote, he leverages his ability to spot lanes and create space to amplify his impact as both a shooter and passer. A quick fake opens up shooting and passing lanes, and he generally chooses the right play at the right time. He gets open between defenders to blast powerful one-timers and occasionally makes the extra pass for a tap-in, end quote. Ryan Kennedy of Hockey News was the person who had him ranked the lowest at number 21. The highest ranking had him at number 91 by Elite Prospects. So again, despite these guys being experts and scouts and talent evaluators, they have these guys ranked kind of all over the place. The TSN draft guys, Craig Button and Bob McKenzie, also had differing opinions on who the Kings should take at number 21. Button says they should take 6'1", 190-pound center Michael Haig from the Chicago Still in the USHL. Elite Prospects says about the 18-year-old Haig, quote, he's a dynamic rush attacker combining inside drives, flashy dekes, and give-and-go playmaking. A crossover burst gets defenders moving, then he looks for vulnerabilities. He fakes wide, cuts in, and accelerates to the net, end quote. He was ranked as low as 17th by the Hockey News' Ryan Kennedy, ranked as high as 36th by TSN's Bob McKenzie. Speaking of McKenzie, he suggests the Kings at number 21 should take forward Ryder Ritchie from the Prince Albert Raiders in the Western Hockey League. Elite Prospects says about the 17-year-old, 6 foot, 174-pound Ritchie, who is originally from Sweden, quote, both a scoring and playmaking threat. He combines give and goes with crossovers and east-west movement, constantly shifting the defense and creating gaps. Just when opponents think they figured him out, he cuts back and finds the trailer. His shot in particular is a constant threat. There are zero tells inside his release, transferring his weight suddenly and hiding his blade the whole time. He is adept at tricky passes and instantly fires them even under pressure. He's adept at tricky passes, it says, end quote. So for Ryder Ritchie, he was ranked as low as number 21 by Bob McKenzie and as high as number 37 by the Hockey News' Tony Ferrari. Elite Prospects thinks the Kings should go with center Sasha Boyer from the Muskegon Lumberjacks of the USHL. It's spelled Boisvert, but I believe it is pronounced Beauvais. They said about the 6'2", 179-pound, 18-year-old forward, quote, Beauvais is a goal scorer, a deceptive wrister, and powerful one-timer make him a threat from distance, while his net front skills and off-puck timing drive his in-tight finishing. He can also make just about every pass in the book, easily navigating layers of sticks with slip and saucer passes, even off the backhand. The passing skill appear mostly off the rush, finding cross-ice targets for high-value entries and faking the shot to prepare the cross-slot lane, end quote. Some of the wording on these is really fun. So for Sasha Boyer, he is ranked as high as 19th by Tony Ferrari of the Hockey News and as low as 30th by Ryan Kennedy of the Hockey News. So even the two Hockey News guys have him, and well, in the ballpark, not fairly close considering some of the disparities we've talked about so far. Finally, as far as the forwards, we have Sam Cosentino from Sportsnet. He thinks the Kings should take left winger Liam Greentree from the Windsor Spitfires in the OHL. This is what Elite Prospects had to say about the 6'2", 211-pound Greentree. Quote, he navigates his way around opponents with a series of look-offs, give and goes, and a sophisticated delay game that allows him to problem solve his way around numbers off the rush. He's constantly scanning, registering his opponents and the obstacles that would keep him from getting them the puck, end quote. So it sounds like a guy who's a good passer and playmaker. He was ranked as low as 15 by Elite Prospects and as high as 25 by Ryan Kennedy, the Hockey News. So this player, again, Liam Greentree, probably the highest ranked overall player of any of the people that have said that he needs to be selected by the Kings. So again, Liam Greentree across the board was the highest, or I should say the lowest ranked player. Sometimes I get those mixed up. The lowest ranked player of any of the players that have been mentioned as possible targets for the LA Kings. All right, so 8 different opinions about 8 different forwards, all coming from different shapes and sizes and different backgrounds and different skill sets. What about a couple of defensemen the LA Kings might consider? We talk about that next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Summertime means baseball plus the NHL and NBA finals, and you can bet on all of it with FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet on everything from who will be the finals MVP to who's going to hit one out of the park. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. Will the Panthers beat the Oilers for their first Stanley Cup title? Will the Celtics close out the Mavericks for their record 18th championship? It's a great time of the year to be a sports fan, and it can be even more fun by winning with FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, we continue to look at what draft scouts and experts are saying about who the LA Kings should select with the 21st overall pick in this year's draft. Two of the 10 experts that I looked at think the Kings should not take a forward, but should take a defenseman. Stephen Ellis of the Daily Faceoff suggests 6'2", 200-pound Norwegian defenseman Sten Solberg. Elite Prospect says about the 18-year-old left shot, quote, Stolberg, above everything else, has a mean streak. He's not content just repelling opponents. He wants them to be as close as possible, and then they are easy for him to press his stick into their back. He inflicts pain every chance he gets, immobilizes opponents, and knocks them away from the front of the net. End quote. So if you happen to be someone who thinks the Kings could use a bit more snarl in their game, sounds like this kid Sten Solberg might be someone you'd be interested in. And one thing that is interesting about him, that if he is in fact picked by the Kings at number 21 or any other team in the first round, he would be the first player ever selected in the first round from Norway. Now that might keep some teams away from him, but the Kings certainly were not shy about picking the first ever player out of Slovenia in the first round, and that has worked out pretty well with Andrzej Kopitar. Last but not least, our Locked On NHL Prospects host, Heidi Kalakash, who's been a guest on this show and hopefully will be once the draft is over to evaluate the Kings NHL draft. He thinks the Kings should go with defenseman Adam Juracek. He's 6'3", 178 pounds, a right shot defenseman from Czechia. Elite Prospects had this to say about Juracek, quote, has excellent hockey sense. He identifies his responsibilities in all three zones very well. What's missing is a bit more jump and aggressiveness. He fronts the play defensively, but he has room to attack and check and win more pucks. Same goes for his offensive zone. He distributes fine, but when he gets a chance to direct a puck on net, he needs to plan ahead and release the play to the net quicker, harder, and more accurately. Leans two-way distributor. Needs time. Added strength should clean up some of his deficiencies. End quote. So that was Adam Juracek, defenseman out of Czechia, and that was our guy, Heidi Kalakash, thinks that's who the LA Kings should select at number 21. So obviously there's a lot of suggestions and a lot of different opinions about who the Kings should take. As far as my philosophy and what I think the Kings have shown in the recent past, of course, it's been a little bit out of necessity because they haven't had those, high-end picks in the last couple of years anyway. I say you take the best player available and you take the player with the highest possible upside. Now, you could draft for need, and maybe that makes a little bit more sense if you're a team that happens to be a little bit closer to a playoff spot than maybe some of the other teams, and you happen to pick in the top 10, maybe there's a glaring need. You could go for that. But I think especially like for the Kings who are picking in the 20s, really drafting for need, I don't think makes a lot of sense because, like I said, let's just say my hypothesis of 5 years being the general timeline of when a player makes it to the NHL after being drafted. How do you know what your needs are going to be in 5 years? You could sort of project it. If you look at the Kings roster and you think, okay, who's going to be on the team in 5 years? You could pick a few guys, but there's still going to be a lot of change in 5 years. I mean, just think where the Kings were 5 years ago to where they are now. So it doesn't, drafting for need to me is not the smart move. I think you draft the best player available. And I also think you don't play it safe, especially if you're in the 20s like the LA Kings are. Who has the biggest upside? Even a player who maybe has some warts. Who is a guy who, maybe he's not the greatest skater in the world right now, but he has all the intangibles. Maybe he has had some injury issues, but if he's healthy, you really think he could turn into a player, but because of his health, his draft stock has dropped. Maybe there's some deficiencies in a player's game, but you're like, if he could just develop that, he really could be, a top 15 type of a pick. So the Kings have done that pretty well, usually drafting guys after the 5th round that have turned out to be, some pretty good players. So to me, that's where the Kings should go. Like I said, go for the home run, swing big, hit big. Get your chances. If you don't want to play it safe because, okay, say there's a guy that you're like, okay, he's probably going to be an NHL contributor, but he'll be a bottom six forward or a second or third pairing defenseman. I'm not saying those guys aren't valuable, but you can get those guys in free agency. You don't need to spend your number one draft picks on those kind of guys. You want to get a guy who's going to be a top six forward. You want to get a guy who's going to be a top pairing defenseman eventually. And again, maybe right now it doesn't project to be there, but you think he's got some skills that could eventually get him there with the right situation. So we'll see what the LA Kings do, but I say best player available, and go for the guy who's got the biggest upside. Maybe at this point there's something a little bit wrong with his game, but if you can figure it out, then you've got yourself a player. So that's what I hope the Kings will do. As far as all those names that we listed, I don't expect you to remember them all, but come draft time, obviously, we'll keep an eye on where those guys go, kind of where they go in the draft and what team they go to. And of course, if any of those names hit for the LA Kings, we'll certainly go and do a deeper dive on some of those names that we've mentioned, but just kind of planting the seed right now on some names that some of these so-called experts out there think could be the pick for the LA Kings at number 21. All right, for you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, coming up this week, we're going to take a closer look at players that are available in free agency for the Kings, could fill some of the holes that the Kings might have. There's not many, but there are a few. We'll also talk about some of the players from this past year, how they project going forward. We'll line up a special guest along the way. And of course, as always, we'll have our Friday Kings fan feedback show. If you have any thoughts as a fan, maybe you're an insider with the draft. Maybe it's one of your little pet projects. Maybe it's something you really love to focus on. If you know anything about some of these players we've mentioned, or if there's a player that you think the Kings should target, it's your chance to be a draft expert yourself. Pass it on for our Friday fan feedback show. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to send an email for that feedback show, the email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. And if you're watching on YouTube, love for you to post your thoughts in the comments. That always helps the algorithm, helps the show to get found on YouTube. We appreciate that. If you are somebody that wants to connect with us on social media, we'd love that too. X, Twitter, Instagram, we are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you, as always, for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you tomorrow. And as always, go Kings, go.